Welcome to the Anton Stetner podcast, and today we're talking about Trump's big, beautiful bill. Will it or will it not make us pay more in taxes? Will it cost us a lot? Is it going to affect real estate in a negative or positive way? That is the question.
Yeah. What if I told you that Trump's latest tax bill made it easier for us to build wealth in real estate, easier than ever before? And this tax code was literally written in favor of us that own dirt, aka hard assets, aka real estate, because Trump's a real estate guy. And so this whole bill was written for real estate profits. So he just signed the big, beautiful bill, which is basically 4.5 trillion in tax cuts. And what does this mean for our real estate portfolio? Is this like the opportunity of a lifetime, or are we headed for an economic cliff? Because this is also increasing our deficit. And the trade war is continuing right now. And the Fed is holding off cutting, possibly for political reasons. And so the 10-year Treasury surged again in the last week, causing all debt, including our real estate debt, to get more expensive. So the future's not totally certain, but our subscribers know that we're always trying to get them the latest information of what we're seeing inside the market, an unbiased view, so that they can make the best decisions for their financial future. And so today we're going to talk about the tax breaks every American should know. We're going to talk about the intermediate real estate benefits. And then the last one is going to be the biggest long-term economic benefit to real estate, but also the economic consequences of, this massive tax breaks.
Yeah, frankly, I don't actually know what's in the big, beautiful bill. I just know that there's a lot of complaints about it from both sides. Uniquely, it's like they're teaming up. But then when you talk to somebody like Trump, it's not like I talk to him, but just when you hear him talk about it or his inner team, they always bring up the positives. Oh, that kind of makes sense. So how does the big, beautiful bill affect everyday Americans?
Yeah.
Why should we care what's good and then what's bad?
Yeah, the three things I think affect everyday Americans the most are the no taxes on tips, the no taxes on overtime pay, and then basically locking in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2017, and then having them rise a little bit for inflation. So I basically wanted to create an example because I worked in the restaurant business, and I got cash tips. So this one kind of comes directly to my heart. So my example is they describe tips as if you would receive them ordinarily and normally in that business. So the HVAC worker who installs, heating and air conditioning can't suddenly change it to where all of a sudden on the bill he's now getting $1,000 tip. That's not going to be ordinary and normal. But Jessica, a waitress in Seattle, for example, if she earned $2,000 a month in tips on top of her hourly wage. So before this bill, that would probably cost her between $400 to $600 a month in taxes, depending on her tax bracket. Now that $2,000 at the federal level, so different state to state, is literally tax-free. That's up to $5,280 a year if she's in a 22% tax bracket. So she's saving almost $5,300 a year just because of taxes. That could be used to pay for rent, car payments, make investments, buy real estate, put it in your Roth. So this is massive amount of money coming to the ordinary, everyday American. And that was the complaint. The complaint about this bill has been, oh, this is just tax cuts for the rich. Rich people aren't servers and baristas. Okay. And the next one is the no federal income tax on overtime. So if you're working 40 hours a week now, and, let's just say we got Marcus, the HVAC tech, and his normal wages is $30. And then when he's doing overtime, he makes $45 or, time and a half. So if he did 10 hours of overtime each week, that would be $450 in overtime and about $1,950 a month. So before this bill, he would owe anywhere between 10 to 22% or $200 to $400 a month. And now that entire approximately $2,000, which is about $24,000 at the end of the year, is now tax-free. Just amazing. That's saving him $5,000 to $7,000 a year. And then the tax brackets, basically, here's where the tax brackets ended up after the one big beautiful bill.
And this is the stuff that was instated in the 2016 term that is being like restated and kind of put into stone.
Yes. So in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they had these brackets, and these brackets got reinstated, and some of them got moved up slightly, and then they got adjusted for inflation. So for instance, the 10% bracket, for example, pre the one big beautiful bill, went to $9,525, and now inflation adjusted, it goes to $11,600. Your next tax bracket is 12% from 11.6 to just over 47. Your next tax bracket is 22 from 47,000 to 98,000. So the thing people forget about taxes is it's based on the income. So the second you crest that 98,450, you immediately move to 24%. Okay, so 98,450 to 182,000 at 24, and then you got 32% from 182 to 231, and 35 from 231 to 578. Over 578, you are in the 37% tax bracket, which is our highest tax bracket. So the thing I want everyone to understand is that if the one big beautiful bill didn't pass, all of these tax brackets would have reverted to the tax brackets prior to that, and they all would have went up. So everyone would have got an increase in their taxes. The big beautiful bill simply continued some of the tax cuts we already had.
So I know that we're not trying to talk about the big beautiful bill in its entirety, but can you give me the short answer of why so many complain, both like the people like Elon Musk, as well as, there's friends of mine who are literally crying on social media saying kids aren't going to eat. Can you explain that? Because that's what I'm confused by. Because what you just said seems generally like pretty equal. Obviously, like the super wealthy get a little bit of a bump, but after the 500,000, it's all like the same anyways.
Bingo.
What is the two complaints on both sides?
I think the biggest complaint that both Republicans, Democrat, the pink fluffy unicorn party can agree to is this will enlarge the federal deficit by up to $4.5 trillion.
Because we don't have as much tax revenue?
Because we don't have as much tax revenue. 100% correct.
And that's only if we make the same amount. But I'm trying to play devil's advocate or steelman this other side. If America makes more money,
correct,
we collect more taxes.
And that is the administration's argument, and we'll go into Scott Bessent's specific and the administration's argument a little bit later. But the idea is absolutely correct. They believe that lowering the tax burden increases the incentive of small business to invest, of the homeowner, the individual to invest, which puts more cash into the economy, which causes GDP to grow faster, which causes tax revenue to increase. But the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, cannot take that into consideration. They look at the historical data and they simply overlay that without GDP increasing.
So then let's bring it back to that one example. Why are some people crying about kids not getting food?
Well,
that some of the like social services are going to be cut.
Yeah, so you do have some cuts in social services. Let's use Medicaid for example. You can't get Medicaid if you're not trying to work and you're below, I think it's 45 or something like that. I didn't bother to dig into that part enough, but you have to be working 20 hours a week. That's not a bad thing. I think most people would agree that able-bodied people mooching off of the system is bad. But what people are looking for, because this is very Republican backed and it was done through the reconciliation process, so there's not as many votes needed, that they're looking for things to point out to create the fear mongering to promote their party.
Get dramatic kind of like narratives.
Bingo. And then I think Elon was pissed off specifically because he went and spent a ton of his time to get cuts. The reconciliation process is not the place where you can make massive government cuts. That has to be done in a bipartisan bill. So the administration has been saying, hey, we are going to come back around and work on those cuts and making DOGE recommendations permanent. But that's not enough for Elon because he's more of an absolutist. It's more black and white. And so for him, he believes we're headed towards a fiscal cliff that if we don't slow the car down now, we're running into problems.
Got it. And a lot of it just has to do with the debt, which is really high.
The debt is really high, but not as high as other nations. So high for us. And we have to get it under control in order to have long-term cheap debt.
Yeah.
So we have to control our spending in order for the consumer society that we have to ensure long-term cheap debt. If we don't, it will be a problem and we'll just pay more for debt in the future.
Got it. All right. Secondly is, what are the wins for legacy real estate tax code? Explain what that even means.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that are always come up on the chopping block that people don't realize come up on the chopping block. So people who are just the average real estate investor, not the super nerds like we are, not the crazy, amazing real estate investors that listen to us on a regular basis, the 1031 was on the chopping block again. And it comes up almost every bill where the 1031 tax deferred exchange, they talk about getting it removed because Congress goes in and attacks it in one form or another.
Why?
The 1031 tax deferred exchange allows a real estate investor to sell a duplex, for example, and then to put the money with a qualified intermediary, not touch the money, and then roll all of that into the next property and defer all of the taxes. It's one of the only things in real estate that allows tax deferral. And so this is one thing that's always promoted real estate, and our government believes this helps to promote home ownership, strong economy, and strong communities because it provides rental housing. But there are politicians that see this as a loophole for the rich. But remember, the average investor owns 2 properties in the United States. And I was reading something else. It said 90% of all real estate investors own 6 properties or less. The next 5% own 6 to 10 properties. That literally means only 5% of all real estate investors own more than 5 properties. But yet, we like to blame the boogeyman, corporate America, for just the lack of supply due to overregulation and underbuilding.
And of course, in that example, can you explain why it's good for the average, owner that only owns 2, why the 1031 would directly benefit them?
It benefits them at such a large level because when you only own just a handful of them, if you had to pay 30% out in taxes and you had 200,000 in gains, so they immediately took 60,000 from you instead of allowing all 200,000 to roll forward. Now you the asset that you would purchase, so a $200,000 asset at 25% down. Let's just do the math real quick so I don't mess it up. 200,000 divided by, so that'll get you an $800,000 property. But if they only had 140,000 because they had to pay 60,000 in taxes, what happens is they end up with a $560,000 property. Compounded over 10, 20 years, this is missing millions and millions of dollars in gains. That's the major difference. So that got made permanent. Yes, let's go. This is the holy grail of real estate investing. Permanent is the qualified business income deduction, or the QBI. So the QBI deduction was made permanent from 20% to 23%, resulting in an effective 28.49% effective tax rate for real estate activities, which generally qualify. The benefit here is we have improved yields, we have long-term flexibility, long-term planning. This is like getting a permanent discount on your real estate income because you get a deduction on your qualified business income right on your tax return. That's income coming from real estate investments. Once again, made permanent, check. The next one is the preservation of business interest deduction for real property. Now, when I say this is almost worse than the QBI one. People go, I don't even know what that means. This means for real estate professionals that they can deduct the interest from the property and that is maintained. So for people like me or people who are fund managers, so I'm a licensed real estate broker here in the Seattle Metro, we get unlimited deductions for interest write-off and depreciation. And this part of the code may preserve that and kept that moving forward. This keeps real estate values preserved because people wouldn't have to liquidate capital, and it gives them more write-offs. As it gives them more write-offs, they spend more money in real estate. This puts real estate investors and real estate professionals at a distinct tax advantage to many other types of businesses, and it incentivizes debt financing of real estate, which continues to grow the economy.
And also more so fix the problem of lack of housing potentially. More people in the industry.
Because
you think they were thinking about that?
They totally think about that because the government knows that when they subsidize housing directly, when they subsidize housing indirectly, that they're providing a benefit to society. And in providing that benefit, they're helping all of society. And then lastly, the government knows that they cannot deliver housing as cheap as you and I can. Every time they do it, there's all these cost overruns and it costs 30, 40% more.
All right. So that's good to know because I think that sometimes in the news cycles or the headlines on articles, as well as, when you're watching the cable news shows, they don't talk about context or the motivation. Because we've been talking about this for 3 years now about lack of inventory, which is causing a lot of competition, which is causing, even with interest rates going up high, prices aren't coming down. They're still going up. And the government, we've seen, cannot fix housing. In fact, there's never been a housing project that you're like, wow, the government just did like an amazing job. So it takes a private sector, whether it's from greed or not, to create more houses. So just going with the natural way of things, incentivizing them by giving them tax breaks or these credits or whatever. And that's a solution to the inventory problem.
It is.
It's just one that's not like direct.
This is a three-prong indirect approach that maintains investors putting capital and taking risk in real estate, which creates stable societies, stable communities, and stable neighborhoods.
Last question. You never hear about anyone talking about the real estate angle of the big beautiful bill when you hear people talking about on social media. How big is the real estate significance inside of this bill?
I would say it makes up 50% of the bill.
That's crazy that no one talks about it.
It's not as important to them, but it's super important to us and to our listeners. And that's why we're digging into every aspect of this so that they can basically win over the next 5 years with this information.
All right, so next up is the tax code power-ups. Can you explain what that is, and is that good or bad?
You know what? None of this is bad. I mean, this whole thing is good. The bad is the 4.5 trillion in deficit. I mean, that's the bad part. But the power-ups were the extension of the low-income housing tax credit and of opportunity zones. So the low-income housing tax credit, they call them an LIHTC, was expanded. And it increases the allocation to 12% and reduces the 4% bond financing threshold to 25% in 2026. Let's break that down in English. There are more tax credits available to build more low-income housing. They require less bonds, so they should be easier to finance to provide more low-income housing. Boom. Phenomenal. Love it. This is how some of those bigger multifamily projects are financed, and how they make sense is through things like this. Opportunity zones. Opportunity zones were made permanent. So opportunity zones was an idea that we would go into areas that needed to grow or had blight, and we would provide tax incentives for capital funds to go into those areas.
Give a real world example.
Real world example right here in the Seattle metro at the north end of Snohomish County is the Marysville Arlington Advanced Manufacturing Park. It's 1,500 acres of industrial. The whole thing is an opportunity zone. So you've seen money dump into there like nobody's business. The largest industrial developer in the United States is building 4.5 million acres just north of us, up there in that.
Oh, is that where the Amazon?
That's where
warehouse is?
Amazon is. That's where the Tesla one is. That's where the Frito-Lay one is. That's where the guys that build part of the space station. All of that stuff is coming to North Snohomish County, which is about 35 minutes north of Seattle, because of these tax breaks. And that's just one example. If you can go and you can Google opportunity zone map, and it will show you where opportunity zones are in every county across the United States.
Which in turn brings more jobs.
Bingo.
Brings more income.
Bingo.
Brings more spending of money in those communities,
Yes.
which would benefit small businesses and just like the community generally.
You're absolutely nailing
And then
it.
spread it out from the major cities where those were the hubs.
So that's exactly it. Most of these opportunity zones are located outside of the metro, and so it's pulling money to the outer parts of the metro to benefit the whole community. The opportunity zones were made permanent with a reoccurring 10-year designations starting in 2026, eliminating the 2026 sunset for the capital gains deferral. Let me explain. In an opportunity zone, you can sell anything. You could sell stocks, you could sell crypto, you could sell a business.
And then you get tax breaks?
Go in there. And then you can shove it in and defer the gain. So this is why opportunity zones are so cool. Businesses, crypto, real estate, stocks, art, whatever it is. You shove it in and then you defer the gain. You get a 5-year recognition and a permanent 10% step up in basis. So it goes in, it has to be there for 5 years, and let's just say you had $1 million gain. After 5 years, you get a permanent 10% step up in the basis, which would eat 10% of that $1 million gain. So you'd have a $900,000 gain. You can keep it there, then tax deferred. There's a whole bunch of weird things. But then after 10 years goes by, if the money is locked up for 10 years, it's tax free. So opportunity zones can be absolutely phenomenal. I said that wrong. The gain is tax-free, but you still owe the capital gain on the asset that went in, but you deferred it for 5 years. So you defer it for 5 years, you get a step up in basis, and then any gain on top of that after 10 years is tax-free. So what's happened is money gets pulled into these communities and it sits there for over a decade so it can grow to that tax-free status. Love it. Love it, love it, love it.
All right. So then what are some other things that we need to know about this BBB?
Yeah. So we've got some kind of like subtle shifts and possible mixed opportunities. So the bill absolutely has a bunch of benefits, but it's not all perfect. It's not sunshine and rainbows. And there were some shifts and things that didn't make it that could have helped. So one of them that did help was the state and local income tax cap was increased, but only temporary. So Washington State, we don't have an income tax, but like Oregon has an income tax, for example. So you can deduct up to $40,000 for households that make under $500K off of your federal taxes if you had to pay taxes if you lived in Oregon, for example. And now the problem is this is only temporary, and I think this should have been made permanent. I think that's a missed opportunity. But even a temporary tax deduction or reduction helps to stimulate the economy because houses households under 500K are the ones who spend the majority of their income on consumption. So what's very interesting when you look at just sheer economics, the true fact or the sad fact, however you want to look at it, the lower your income level, the more that you spend on consumption. And so by putting up to $40,000 extra into these people's pocket, they will spend that and put that right back into the economy. So this is one thing that's part of the Trump administration's plan, is these tax breaks then result in things like this that shove capital into the economy, that makes it spin faster, causes GDP to grow faster, which pulls down interest rates and pulls down inflation.
So you're saying more trips to Costco?
I'm saying it's on like Donkey Kong. Let's go to Costco, brother. and you know, make a video about Costco while you're there, right?
Yeah, I should talk about the BBB when I'm at Costco.
So the permanent mortgage interest deduction cap. Now, they have all these weird things. So let me just explain this one. They lowered it to $750,000. It was $1 million in debt. This is for your primary or your secondary residence. You can deduct up to $750,000 in debt. I think it was a missed opportunity because I think on the primary residence, we should have kept it at $1 million and then tagged it to inflation and just had it straight grow from there. Because of course we live in the Seattle metro, and what was the average price last month in King County? 1.15.
What's my house? It's like around 750, right? So I'm okay.
Well, but it would have to be 750 in debt.
Okay.
Not the value.
Okay, got it.
And so the primary or secondary residences, they get to deduct this. And then for rental properties, that generally shows up as an expense deduction on your Schedule E or through your tax entity like your C Corp or your S Corp. What they did really well was they got a permanent reduction or deduction in mortgage insurance. So it makes permanent the deductibility of mortgage insurance premiums, PMI, FHA, VA, MIP, funding fees, USDA fees. These are now permanently deductible, subject to income limits. Understand that just helps the average consumer at such a high level. Good job for them. Good win. I think they lost on this one. No new federal down payment assistance or homebuyer assistance. With the average age of a homebuyer rising to 38 right now, and it was just 28 over a decade ago. Okay, that's a horrible stat. We got to start doing whatever we can to get the first-time home buyer into a home so they can live the American dream and they can build wealth. Even though I'm very capitalist, very pro-business, I do believe in subsidizing or helping first-time home buyers just because the cost of housing has gotten so expensive and we're not doing anything to build enough to drop the price. And then they killed off some of the Green New Deal and retrofit programs in relation to real estate.
All right, so a lot there, but let's talk about the number one thing that people are complaining about that you alluded to before. And it's funny looking at this U.S. debt clock because I have something to say about that, which is the elephant in the room when it comes to the BBB.
Dude, isn't that when you look at the U.S. debt clock right there?
Well,
isn't that...
You want to know what I was thinking?
Yeah, please.
When I first saw the U.S. debt clock, when I even cared about it, I think it might have been like during that crash, 2007, 2008 crash. Yeah. It was at 17 trillion.
Yeah.
And now it's at 37 trillion right now.
Yeah. So more than doubled.
Way more than doubled.
Yeah. And growing fast. If you listeners, subscribers, if you guys want to go to usdebtclock.org, you can see how fast the debt is going up, and it's literally clicking over in the hundreds of millions of dollars instantly.
Debt per taxpayer is $323,000.
Yeah, it means the average taxpayer, if we were just to hand them the debt, would owe $323,000 plus their student debt, plus their auto debt,
plus all their own personal debt. Yeah,
plus their credit card debt.
Yeah,
plus their house. Yeah, it's wild. This is what we have to get under control. This was why Elon was getting so pissed off. This is why people are screaming is we do have to slow this spending down, or you've got to grow the economy at a massively higher rate than what we were before. You've got to get the debt to GDP ratio down because it's cresting 100 and some percent. It's like 110 or 105. Over 100%, bad. We just talked about it. This massive increase in the federal debt. It's projected to add 3.3 trillion in debt over the next 10 years. If the temporary tax provisions are made permanent, it could rise to 3.7. And from 2025 to 2055, estimates are it could hit 16.1 trillion. And that includes the 4.5 trillion in tax cuts.
16 trillion over the 37?
Over the 3.7. Yes. 37 trillion plus 16.1 trillion by 2055.
Which is 30 years away?
20.
20.
25.
25, yeah. No, I'm just like, I'm getting all these numbers mixed up, which is a lot.
No, it's astounding.
So the one thing maybe some people don't know, it's not just the amount that is a problem, it's the payment on that amount.
Yes, correct.
We've kind of talked about this, but it's never been a focus of our conversation. But when you think about the interest rate that the Fed sets, can you talk about how that relates to this debt?
Yeah, 100%.
And why this is a problem in terms of that debt payment?
Yeah. So as the Federal Reserve sets the Fed funds rate, what then happens is, they're kind of like all boats in the harbor. The Fed's funds rate is the overnight rate at the beginning of the curve. Then the other treasuries that we use to cover our debt then start to play out. And there's a 6-month treasury, a 1-year, a 2-year, a 5-year, a 10, a 30, and I think there's even a 30-day and maybe a 90-day. What happens is each one of those treasuries kind of fall in line, but that's how we finance the debt. So when someone's talking about a 10-year treasury, let's say $1 trillion is issued in 10-year treasuries, they're issued at whatever today's rate is. And let's just say it's 4.4%. So now you got to pay 4.4% to finance the debt on $1 trillion. As the debt rises and as our interest rate rises, the percentage of the tax revenue collected gets bigger that you got to just go to pay your debts. Same like it is for a person. If their credit card bill goes up and they've got money on their credit card bill, it costs more to pay the bill every month. So what's happening is our interest payments have exceeded our defense budget. That's a problem. We shouldn't be spending more money on debt than we're spending on our services.
And couldn't you say this is why everyone is complaining, including Elon Musk? And in your judgment, that's still worth the risk for the benefits we're getting right now?
It's worth the long-term risk, the tax cuts are, if we grow faster than the predictions. If GDP, instead of growing at like 1.5, grows at 2.5 to 5% and outgrows the CBO's predictions, which we totally can with AI, with a housing boom, with data centers, with tech. There are ways that we can do this. And so I am very pro, but realize this is kind of a punt maneuver. They're just kicking the can down the field and saying, oh, we'll just deal with it later. We still have to get the fiscal house in. So I'm hoping in whatever next tax bill comes up, we do cut some more of the government spending there because that'll help even more.
When is that?
I think it's towards the latter part of this year. So, sometime in the next 6 months. And what this is happening, what's happening here too, though, Benji, is understand that because the debt is 37 trillion and because our debt is getting so big that if we don't get it under control by 2055, our GDP to debt ratio could hit 186%. That puts
186?
Yes.
And right now it's 106?
It's like 105, 106, somewhere in there. That would put us at the same level as Japan and Sudan. Okay.
In terms of debt payments.
In terms of debt payments.
And I just went to Japan. It's not that bad there right now.
Japan is not that bad, but they're kind of the anomaly in the high debt.
You want to know why? Because they work so hard.
Yeah. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
The whole culture.
Yeah.
What this is doing, though, is this is what's keeping the 10-year Treasury higher, which is keeping everyone's borrowing costs higher. So we do have to get this down. I want to talk about, though, how the administration believes what they should be doing. So Scott Bessent has been coming out and being like, everything's okay. He's our U.S. Treasury Secretary. It's all good. Here's what we're going to do. He has said, and multiple members of the administration have said, that we are aiming for their economic plan called the 3-3-3 plan, which aims for real GDP growth of 3%, deficit at less than 3%, and you know what? I forget what the other 3% is. But what that does is that has a long-term implication on the rate of our debt and on the growth of our economy. So what they're basically saying is we're going to grow GDP faster than the debt so we can collect more tax revenue. And their Council of Economic Advisors for the Trump administration believes that they could reduce deficit spending by $755 billion relative to the $4.5 trillion that the CBO has as their baseline. So they believe they can cut like $3 trillion out of this problem by growing the economy faster.
And then the third three, isn't that inflation? The
inflation. Oh, thank you. Yes.
No.
Yes, yeah, it's having the inflation down. So for 2024, we ran a deficit of 1.8 trillion, and in as of May of 2025, we're at 1.36 trillion. So we have not slowed down. We are quite honestly speeding up. So the best is for last. And
yeah, so that sounded pretty dark there. But I like one thing I like about Bessent. I wish that was a guy that if I could, drink with him and like really get his honest opinion, I feel like would tell you the truth about what's going on. Of course, he's in the administration, but it's just he's so calm and collected whenever he gets interviewed.
And he's a hardcore numbers guy with a track record.
For sure. He has like a lot of experience, but his 3-3-3 is what's fascinating. That's why I knew about the inflation thing, because that is the plan.
Yeah.
And if that plan is executed long term, then you're talking we would be in the positive. It would be a great thing for America and maybe even the world.
So the bet is that we will go through another golden age in the next 10 years because of these tax cuts. That's what this administration has bet. And my personal feeling is I agree. And so what am I doing with my own capital? Not financial advice. I'm betting my money on real estate, because these tax cuts, and especially this last one that we're going to talk about here, will promote massive growth in the real estate sector.
Got it. All right. So then you saved the best for last. What is the best?
So the two that are the best for last is I want to talk about Section 179 and bonus depreciation. A quick refresher on depreciation. Depreciation, it's an annual income tax deduction, allows you to recover the cost of certain properties over its useful life. You can depreciate most tangible properties like buildings, but you don't get to do the land, machinery, vehicles, furniture, equipment. It's used in your business or income producing activities. It has a specific usable or a determinable life, and it's expected to last more than 1 year. And so what this means to the average person is Section 179 allows you, if you go and buy a car for business, okay? If you buy a 6,000 pound vehicle, talk to your tax advisor, of course, you can write off the whole vehicle in year one. So for conversation's sake, you go buy a Ford F-250 diesel. You're using it for work in your work business. And let's say it's a $95,000 vehicle. You will then get a $95,000 write-off. You go buy a track hoe. You buy desks in your business. You get to write those off immediately. You get to expense them 100% in year one, not over time. This massively stimulates small business and, of course, stimulates real estate. So 179 basically allows you to deduct the full purchase price of qualifying equipment and or software in the year it was placed in service rather than depreciating it over a longer period of time. Immediate deduction up front. If this wasn't enacted, this was basically being phased out. For 2020 year, the maximum deduction was 1.25. Now the limits start to phase out if a business is more than 3.1 million in qualifying services, and the deduction reaches zero at 4.27 million. The deduction is limited by your business's taxable income. So in other words, the business had to have made money in order for you to have a deduction. So 179 doesn't generally apply in real estate purchases, but it does apply for what's called a qualified real property. And this is where people have used it in the short-term rental loop. So when someone's not a real estate professional, if they're doing a short-term rental quite often qualifies for 100% bonus depreciation because of Section 179. Now we're going to flip over to the so this was basically being phased out. Literally, it was 80% in 2023, 60 in 2024, then 40 in this year, then 20, then zero. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking about, I got confused with my own notes here. I was talking about bonus depreciation. So bonus depreciation applies for real estate professionals. And so this is you're licensed or you have over 750 hours a year in real estate. And bonus depreciation, when you have 100% bonus depreciation, some quick ghetto math is you're going to get anywhere between an 18 to a 24% write-off of the total value of that structure. So if you bought $1 million piece of property, you're going to get somewhere between $180,000 to a $240,000 write-off depending on your tax bracket. Oh my goodness, that's such a huge write-off because it's against your
personal income.
Yes, your AGI. So that flows through and hits your AGI. So this is nitrous oxide for the real estate industry because this allows syndicators to pass on depreciation to the LPs. It allows real estate professionals to buy a duplex and depreciate it. It allows you to go buy a warehouse and depreciate it, to buy a office building for you and then rapidly depreciate it.
Depreciate your income, your AGI.
Depreciate the structure, which then that depreciation flows over and hits your adjusted gross income.
Can you give like a quick example with easy numbers to follow with that?
The quick example is you bought $1 million building.
Okay.
And in this example, you got a 22% write-off. So all of a sudden you have a $220,000 write-off, assuming that was in like a flow-through entity like an LLC.
Okay.
That hits your Schedule E minus 222,000.
So like,
so
say
if you had, hold on. So if you had 300,000 in active income, after your other deductions, I still have 300,000. It would then drop your active income to 80 grand.
And then you get taxed on the 80.
You get taxed on the 80 instead of the 300.
Was this, so I wasn't quite following, but was this always a thing for years prior? And I see these numbers going down, down, down.
This was passed in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017.
Yeah.
And it was 100%.
Yeah.
And then it started phasing out.
Got it. And now it's set in stone at 20%.
No, it's set in stone at 100% bonus depreciation, but in practicality, because it's bonus depreciation, very simple, is what they do is you go to a tax segregation specialist. The tax segregation specialist does a tax segregation study, and they look at the building and they say, hey, these items are going to fall apart faster. The carpet, the trim, the doors, not the roof, but things are going to depreciate faster. They bundle the stuff that's going to depreciate faster together, and then they shove it into the bonus depreciation category, and that's what then gives you that write-off. Because
where do you get the 20% number from?
That's what it turns out to be.
Oh, got
about
it.
18 to 24% of the total value.
Got it. And usually you get that depreciation over time.
Over 27 and a half years or 39.
But now, just like the 6,000 pound curb weight SUV
Yes.
that you can write off right that year, now you can do it with real estate.
You can take a portion of the building and depreciate it faster by accelerating that depreciation.
Yeah. Wow.
And so you still have depreciation left on your depreciation schedule, which is the cool part too. But what happens then is you can just whack your active income down to zero. So my real estate professionals, I want you to use this vehicle specifically to take your AGI and to try to shove it to zero and try to pay nothing in taxes and just invest in real estate. That's the kicker.
So, but you have to be a real estate professional to take advantage of this.
Bingo.
Huh.
Because what happens is non-real estate professionals get a maximum deduction of like, I want to say it's like 60 grand.
Isn't it worth
grand.
it for a person or maybe even a spouse who maybe does like a part-time job
Yes.
to get their real estate license to just take advantage of this? Because to get your license, and I know that you have to have active hours, so you would have to
Yes.
have a part-time job basically, right?
Correct.
But still, you're looking at, in that case alone, you could potentially be saving like, I know this sounds crazy that I would just pull out this number, but in that scenario, you could be saving maybe like 40 to 60 grand in tax payment
If you are,
from like a $5,000 expense plus
if
time.
you're making 250 and above, you would be saving 6 figures in tax payments. Yeah, like an unbelievable amount in tax payments.
Okay, and so where is the motivation, the kind of the long vision for this from the administration? Why would they do this?
This is the gift that keeps on giving. This lights the real estate market on fire. I will say this is also probably a bit of self-dealing. Trump is a real estate guy. They own a bunch of real estate. This makes his real estate more profitable. And the thing, though, that I want you to understand, this is good for 5 years at 100%, and then it's gone. What this is going to do is this is going to speed up the commercial real estate market. This is going to speed up the multifamily market. This creates massive tax incentives for the next 5 years, which will drive down cap rates, which will drive up values. And we are going to ride this wave and make a bunch of money and have a lot of fun. But just realize after 5 years, it goes away. So I'm sitting there thinking about some of our current investments, and I was like, we're going to be making exit plans for 2029 and 2030 as this is ending and as the frenzy is still available, so we can maximize on that and get into higher cash flowing positions. A couple things I believe the big, beautiful bill, because everyone wants to know, all right, what does this boil down to? How do we make this happen? How do I implement it in my daily life? One, I believe the big, beautiful bill is going to pull rates down by lowering taxes and speeding up the amount of capital moving inside the U.S. economy. And by GDP growing, what happens is our debt to GDP ratio goes down. The U.S. becomes less risky. This is regardless of inflation. The U.S. becomes less risky to invest in, and rates will naturally float down because of that. They will also float down because of inflation. So you kind of got a double-sided whammy here. So rates go down. That's number one. Sellers of income-producing properties, you want to be prepared to capitalize on this because this is going to cause cap rates to compress and values to go up. Buyers. Okay, regular home owners, they're not going to be as affected as this much. This is really more hardcore investors. Buyers. I want you to be thinking about what can I buy and value add today or build new construction that it'll work today at a 6 cap or a 7 cap, depending on the debt I get. Then as rates come down, I can then refi for cash flow, or I can sell it as rates come down because the cap rate will come down with it, capitalize on that massive increase in value, roll it into the next property, go get my bonus depreciation so I get a big write-off, and increase my cash flow. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of turning of real estate, of income producing real estate over the next 5 years. You're going to see this in multifamily. You'll see it in office. You'll see it in warehouse. You'll see it in self-storage. Somewhere it won't affect as much, an RV park. Why? There's not as much to depreciate there. A mobile home park, not as much to depreciate. So in the highly depreciable assets with big structures, this is also one thing that's going to help to do is it's going to promote higher rents and multifamily growth, because multifamily is very beat up right now. And the day of reckoning that's coming to B class and C class multifamily is not 100% here. But if I could go buy a B or a C at a discount and then rehab it up to an A or a B plus, so I'm value adding it up. I get it performing I buy it at a 7 cap. I increase all the rents 20%. I value add the whole thing. And then all of a sudden cap rates drop. That's when I'm going to exit. Also, what's very attractive about the multifamily and why rents will rise is because in 2022, multifamily development applications plummeted. And so we're running out of multifamily. And so land development for multifamily and just land development for your traditional single family and your ADUs and your DADUs is going to be a gold mine over the next 5 years. I'm so bullish on land development right now, it's not even funny. I'm more bullish on land development or build to rent than these other ones, because then what we can do is in the land development process, we can create a 20 to a 40% lift. When I build the property, I'm going to get another 5 to a 10% lift. And then as rates come down, that will give me another natural lift. I could get anywhere between 3 to 5 lifts in a row over the next 5 years in land development today. Get going on that. Any thoughts that you had or something I missed? Because you're just looking at me.
Oh, man. I'd say that there's so many thoughts. And I feel way more knowledgeable on how this is going to affect the economy long term. Also, why people are complaining. But the real benefit is to real estate professionals. And if you think about it, even like commercial, who's been hit pretty hard in the last 2 years, would get a benefit because there's more incentive and motivation to get into these. Bingo. And because they've already lost a lot of value, just because there isn't a lot of demand, perfectly positioned for people that have money on the sidelines to get in, invest in these, get those depreciation benefits, especially if you're a real estate professional, and really spark up a lot of not only rehab, but building.
Bingo.
And again, what do we always talk about? The number one factor in why real estate prices are really high is inventory.
Yep.
So if you can alleviate that, it's Trump and the government's indirect way of potentially creating a solution for that. And the last thing I would say is, you said this will make the American market more attractive for outside money.
Yes.
Is that because if we build a lot more, like build more homes, make real estate a little bit more stable, not as volatile, that America just becomes even more, I'd say, like concrete, no pun intended, right?
Yeah.
But I always think about the flip side. China tried to do this and they overbuilt, and they have shells of homes. Well, what's the difference here?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. China over leveraged through government debt, through bonds on their product. So what they did is they would build those giant condo buildings. They would use government debt and bonds to finance them at really cheap rates. They would have them already sold on the back end, so they're literally just sitting there flipping cash and artificially forcing up values. You can't do that here in the United States. So that's risk on risk.
Yeah,
okay.
In this case, it would be private money. This is why the incentive to people is part of the plan. And then secondly, we actually do have a demand for these houses.
Yeah. And with the Big Beautiful Bill and the Genius Act and all of the things that this current administration is doing, is they are protecting the dollar, the U.S. global dominance. They are then keeping us the capital power warehouse of the world. with the most capital that moves the fastest. And this is just another vehicle that starts to, like you were saying, pull outside investors to the United States, because as GDP increases and as this starts to take hold, the risk of our debt goes down, which makes us more attractive. And that'll just continue to suck capital over here. I think, to go back to one thing that you just said too, I want everyone to be crystal clear on this. This is one of those things where you may want to genuinely consider becoming a real estate professional, having your house be or your spouse be a real estate professional. And you don't have to have a license. That's just one of the easy vehicles to do it. Or you want to partner with someone who is in that space that can, help you figure it out, even if you don't get all of the tax benefits. But we are going to go through a real estate boom. This is forcing it to come. I want you to take advantage of the boom. So I'm sure I missed something in here, and I'm sure that, someone's going to disagree with us. So drop it in the comments about what we missed, or questions you have, or something that you disagree with. Love to hear it, and let us know how we can help you here in the Seattle Metro.